what is your dream for the future for animals and their liberation? And in a nutshell, even if you have to reiterate, what do you want us to do about it?
Definitely never going to spoon feed anyone, you know, their tactics, and I think everyone should ask themselves what their strengths are and leverage those strengths. You know, my dream, I think we all have the same dream. It's just a world without oppression and freedom for, I mean, you know, don't laugh at me, Carol. But it's true. I don't know what else to say.
That's good. That's good.
There are many other things that are, very safe that is not covered by ATA. And you touched upon that earlier when you said that just passing someone's name and address, home address, is not against the law. So there's a lot of things we can do that is technically not falling under ATA. And I think if you don't use the cop of a head, you will not know the difference between the two. And we as activists who want to keep reaching out for animals have a responsibility to have the cop of a head so that we can make sure that we can keep reaching out for the animals. So I would actually advise people to keep the cop in their head. Think about what would you do if a bully was doing something to a young kid, and don't do that openly. If you want to do that, and if you're doing it illegally, completely outside the eyes of the cops, you're much safer, because they are surveilling you everywhere you go. So I would actually recommend people keep the cop in their head. Most importantly, the leaders, the ones who are organizing events, they need to keep the cop in their head so that they can make sure those at legal demonstrations can keep doing it year after year. Response?
I would argue that most of the cops in our heads are overly disempowering. I don't think that people's assessment when it comes to their what kind of activism they want to pursue is based on if somebody says to themselves, I'm not going to do X, Y, Z because I'm afraid. It's very, very rarely based on some sort of objective, proven cause and effect relationship. That's almost never what's going on. It's sort of this vague fear that maybe in some roundabout way that I can't really put my finger on, this might expose me to some legal risk, so therefore I'm not going to do it. And that's the kind of cop I'm arguing against. I don't think anybody should do anything where the relationship is very a direct cause and effect relationship, where if I do this, this is going to happen to me. None of us want to be martyrs. None of us, again, are courting imprisonment. So it's two different things altogether, I think. But most of these cops I speak of that exist in our heads are they do the enemy's work much more than they do the animal's work.
What do you think is the best way to recruit and retain members? Is it to have sort of just the rallies and the conferences, or should we also try to get together with them socially, or
the best way to get people involved? I can accept the role of community in movements, definitely, but I think it's more, I would always argue for making it the community is sort of a byproduct, and it comes naturally. I'm not so sure that's something that we should be directing our efforts towards. I think you've got people now that call themselves culinary activists, and they do potlucks, and that is now, it's gotten to the point now where we can put a revolutionary spin on the most inane thing imaginable. So I really think that the community is going to come naturally, and we need that. But I'm much more interested in what people are doing, not what's going to get them together to hang out. I just don't know if that's something we should be emphasizing. I think we've got too much of one and not enough of the other. So this stuff's important, and I'm involved in next week in Salt Lake City. We're doing an all-you-can-eat pizza and movie night. It's a benefit, but I'm not going to say that that those things are more harm than good at all. But I think people should really ask themselves, just whatever you do in your activism, just don't go into it with any illusions. I think it's really important. We really shouldn't delude ourselves. If you go to a protest, don't lie to yourself about what you're doing. Be very honest with yourself, and that's fine. And same thing with having a potluck. But don't say you're a culinary activist, because it's so goddamn pretentious. I'm sorry, but like you're just eating. I don't think this is a food movement. I'm sorry. I know I'm gonna offend people, but this is not. I really don't think I would have stayed in this movement if I'd gotten into it now. I mean, I still would have on some level, but in terms of a movement, because everybody talks about food, and we didn't talk about food in 1996. There was no food to eat. We were fighting for animals. That's what it was for. And I feel like it's such a food-based movement now, and it's people are interested in potlucks, and it's like, and that stuff's great, but that stuff comes naturally. It's not something we should be calling activism, because it's not. It doesn't. It's not what we should be doing for animals. Go to my court dates, and the room would be packed with activists, like literally just bursting over, no seats available. And everyone would show up a little bit early, and the FBI would show up right on time, and they would walk in, and they would have nowhere to sit, and they would have to make room in the front row, and it used to bring me tears of joy. So I mean, just on a purely, sticking where it hurts level, whether or not their client, they think it's going to be, an asset for people to show up in court. I know in BJ and Alice's case, because I live in Utah now, and his lawyers at one point said, stop coming to his court date. To me in particular, but it's everybody too. Because the judge remarked, that, well, this looks like there's people in the courtroom to support him, so therefore I want to make an example out of him. It can go both ways. You have to defer to the attorneys always.
In terms of the comment you made about, I think it's the last one, that is, you have intent to threaten and follow through at some level. It actually seems like AT is written in such a fashion that as long as they can prove that you had an intent to cause fear, that would be enough to convict you in close quarters, which for the longest time in history has been considered a legal act, someone venting their frustrations. But as more and more people look at it, it's quite clear that, at least to me, it's quite clear that some activists, they want to stay legal and do everything they can. But anyone looking at it in a jury, they might feel like the intent is to cause fear. And you can tell by the way people are yelling and screaming. And I'm saying that those kinds of things seem to be addressed by this law over here. So you don't necessarily have to follow through. If you're doing stuff that the average layperson will think is miscarrying someone, it's enough to get you convicted. And as a law-ground activist, once again, it's our responsibility to try to keep doing it year after year.
Sure. In Rosenfeld speak in Eugene a couple months ago, and he made a really good point that when it comes to cases like this, that going to trial is oftentimes the best route, because as soon as a jury sees the kind of people they're calling terrorists, or the kind of people that they're accusing of instilling, quote-unquote, instilling fear, and as soon as those people get humanized, it's very hard. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I could see how it would be. His point is that it's very hard to convince a jury that this 21-year-old girl, well-dressed girl sitting on the witness stand, had the intention of instilling fear of bodily harm in somebody in their house. I can see how that would be a tough sell, when you're actually in a courtroom. But again, I'm not the attorney.
In terms of, we don't know yet, because there hasn't been a jury trial under the ATA, what kind of standard we're going to be dealt with. And so, we've still got to wait and see whether the government's going to have to prove that these specific defendants, intended to cause fear, or whether it's going to be enough that someone just felt fear. And that's one of the biggest things that we're looking at right now, and probably going to be one of the biggest fights. It's going to be pretty determinative of how this case comes out.
I think that it's important that you start setting examples of, reaching out that is very safe, that we're convinced is very safe. And before we put everyone into that situation where they're doing it,